Okay, so our next panel is a patient panel, which are always my favorites. And even though AE is a smaller group today, I feel like we're the mightiest ones. So I'm really excited to interview you guys and ask questions and tell your story. So please join me, Alanna, Erin, and Laura. Come on up. Okay, I promise I won't ask anything too hard. These should be questions that you all can answer in your sleep based on memory and experience and all of that. But why don't we start with maybe some introductions? Just briefly share who you are, where do you live, and who are you outside of your disease? What do you love to do?
Okay, I'm Erin. I live in Toronto. I currently attend university at U of T. I'm in my first year, but I'm planning on going into English and law, hopefully. I enjoy reading when I can, and I like nature and taking hikes.
And are you British?
I'm from England, moved here when I was 9.
Love the accent.
Thank you.
I say autoimmune encephalitis like a Brit, and I love it and I'll never stop. Alanna.
Hi, my name is Alanna Yee. I am from the other side of the country, Edmonton, Alberta. Diagnosed with encephalitis in 2019, and what was the rest?
What do you love to do? What do you love to do? You love traveling, that's for sure.
Yes, definitely love traveling. I'd say learning to embrace the slower moments and kind of meditate, or taking the time to savor a sunset, for example, rather than kind of being more of a workaholic, which I tend to be, as Sumaira knows very well.
Me too. Laura?
And hi, nice to meet you as well. I'm Laura. I live in Mississauga. I was diagnosed with encephalitis at end of 2021, beginning of 2022. And I enjoy traveling. I love animals and spending time with my family and friends.
Do you have any pets?
I don't actually. I know. I grew up with pets, but I don't actually have any.
Okay.
But I always contemplate getting a cat, at least a cat. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so this is how things are going to go. I want to sort of take us all along the journey of from the beginning to today right now. So I'll ask you guys very pointed questions, and then if you want to take like 2 to 3 minutes to answer, that would be great. So let's start from the very, very beginning, and all the questions will be the same for everyone here. Go back to your earliest memory of a symptom with AE. What was that and when was that? We'll start with you.
So for me, I don't remember a lot of my own symptoms. I was first formally diagnosed in December of 2020, but I've been told that I was showing symptoms as early as 2019, 2018. I do remember a kind of cognitive decline, so particularly during 2020 and 2019. Very manic, depressive behavior, very out of focus. I've always been very academic, and I kind of lost that. Oh, there's the mic. And I remember feeling a disconnect with the world around me, and the things that I had previously been very good at or interested in, I no longer really could connect with them, or I was connecting with them a bit too much, and that was the mania. And eventually that progressed, but the first thing I noticed was very much the cognitive decline and the hyper mood swings.
Alanna?
Everything for me began in 2014, and I did not really have the textbook presentation of encephalitis, so I didn't have seizures or psychosis or any sort of movement issues, but for me I had a very severe cognitive decline that began abruptly after a flu-like illness. And it did fluctuate initially, the cognitive issues. So when an EEG and an MRI came back normal, it was thought that perhaps I had depression or atypical bipolar disorder. But my primary issues were memory deficits and verbal fluency problems, slow processing speed, and executive dysfunction. And just to paint a picture of what that looked like, if I think of trying to clean my room, today it might take maybe 30 minutes to do so. But when I was really sick, it once took me 5 days to clean my room. Because, for example, if I picked up a shirt off the floor, my mind would just blank, and it would take me several moments to realize that I wasn't trying to change my outfit, but I was just trying to move the shirt a few feet into the laundry basket. So I had this very disjointed and disordered thinking. And I had gone from being the top student in my medical laboratory science program to not even having the basic ability to hold down an entry-level job. But 5 years into things, I did take a nosedive. I became catatonic and was hospitalized for the first time. And fortunately, there was a pediatric psychiatrist actually that suspected encephalitis and had ordered a full workup, including an FDG PET scan of the brain, which proved to be very critical as it was the main abnormal biomarker that I had. So, long story short, I did get a lot better. I got fully better initially. After this psychiatrist, she did cut through a lot of red tape to ensure the access to care that I needed. Did relapse a couple of times and needed to go through many of the first and second line treatments to get better, but grateful to have made a recovery. I've reversed a loss of over 30 IQ points, and I'm able to work now, able to do a lot of writing and co-author grants, and yeah.
We'll get there. Okay. Laura, your turn.
Yes. So at the beginning, when I first had my encephalitis, it was at the end of 2021. So I still had my memory because later on it was impacted, and there was a period where I don't remember anything. So initially, what I noticed was I had moments of temporary paralysis. So for example, I remember a point where I was eating in a restaurant and I was trying to lift my hand to my mouth to eat, and it wasn't moving. Like I was, my brain was telling it to move, but it just wasn't moving. So things like that a few times, and that really was alarming because obviously it had never happened before. As well, I noticed when I was working, I was on my Zoom call and I would have like a facial spasm during a time when I was trying to concentrate in a meeting, where my mouth would move and I would kind of see it twitching. And then I noticed as well that I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't retain information. So eventually I had to kind of stop working because I wasn't able to. And so things like that, as well as insomnia. I noticed really intense insomnia every night. I was up all night. My brain was racing with different ideas about, the people in my life. I had to apologize for certain things I did, like just all these really, elevated kind of thoughts. So that was the initial.
And from the first symptom that you remember to diagnosis, to an official correct diagnosis, how much time lapsed in between for each of you?
Well, quite a bit. So again, first symptoms were around 2018, 2019, but my diagnosis was late 2020, and I think it ramped up severely around the summer of 2020. So much higher highs, much lower lows. I remember being more impulsive than I usually would, and that was also when I started getting particularly obsessive about certain things. Like I remember at one point I had an interest in like typology, Myers-Briggs, that kind of thing, pseudoscience, but and I was obsessed with like typing everybody in my life, and that kind of very niche focus, because I also have autism and ADHD, and I've always kind of understood the world by defining things, but I had lost my ability to define people. So that was when like people really noticed, oh, there's something wrong. It was my parents that took me in eventually. And so I was very slow and then huge incline in symptoms. By the time I got into hospital, I went absolutely like, that they really got bad very quickly because I didn't know where I was getting hallucinations, all of that kind of thing. So all in all, I'd say it took about 12-ish months for the symptoms to start ramping up, but then over like 3-4 months, it got very bad. And then I was assigned to CHIO very late November, And after a few days, they diagnosed me because amazing neurology and psychiatry team there. Amazing.
So symptoms first began in 2014, and then it was 5 years later when I ended up getting the diagnosis. Again, it was the dementia-like presentation, and one of the last things that I recall just prior to hospitalization was actually walking into my mom's garage and going into my car, and then starting to reverse the car without even opening the garage door. So it kind of messed up her garage door, but it became catatonic, and then that was when I was hospitalized and then ended up being diagnosed 5 years later.
That's terrifying. And you, Laura?
Yeah, so at the end of 2021, I think it took about a month to a month and a half for diagnosis, so a lot quicker. So initially I was misdiagnosed from when I had my memory. I remember that because I was having these strange symptoms, I went to the emergency, and the doctor there asked me, "How old are you?" So I said, it was at the time I was 30 years old. And he said, "Oh, you're really young. I don't think there's really much to worry about." He did like an exercise, to follow his finger. And then he said, "We don't have to do any other kind of tests because I feel like it's fine." So what he said was it's an anxiety. He wrote anxiety problem as the diagnosis and kind of sent me on my way. But deep down I knew, part of me thought, okay, maybe I am because I haven't been sleeping. Maybe I'm worried about these types of things. But part of me thought, well, I haven't been behaving in this way before. And so anyway, all that to say, eventually, which I can get into later, I was hospitalized and diagnosed at the beginning of 2022, so January of 2022, and the misdiagnosis occurred in November of 2021.
Alanna, this question is for you. Going 5 years without a diagnosis is a long time, and it's obviously terrifying. When you finally got the correct diagnosis half a decade later, what did that feel like for you?
I would say that I felt vindicated because I had gone such a long time, either just without a diagnosis or with the assumption that there was a primary psychiatric issue. But deep down, I felt like there was something else going on. And I had actually seen a doctor who did suggest as an outpatient before I was hospitalized that perhaps there was some sort of encephalitis or encephalitis type picture going on. So it was a relief to finally have that diagnosis, because then, with you can begin to define the problem and then actually solve it and get onto treatments so then become better.
And then question for Erin and Laura. You guys both went through sort of the acute stages in the onset during COVID. What was that like? We'll start with you.
It was very difficult because I lived in quite a rural area, and there weren't a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists available. And so all of the ones that we did go to, it took several months to book the appointment and to get in. And then I wasn't yet diagnosed with ADHD at the time. So pretty much every time I went to see a doctor, they would just say, "Oh, she probably has ADHD." And my parents would say, "Okay, well, yeah, she's always like that. There's something else." But because they didn't know me, they didn't know what I was usually like, they just saw these symptoms and thought, okay, yeah, it's that. And so getting to CHEO was kind of like our last straw. But we had to go to the emergency department. We couldn't book. We couldn't ask a specialist because it was COVID and everywhere was busy. So I just remember my mother, she's a nurse. She had the idea to take me to the emergency room. And even then, it was very busy. I remember we just kind of sat in a room for a night because they weren't fully sure what to do with me. But I was on the edge. And after that, it was very difficult because it was also winter when I was in. And so I couldn't see my family members because none of them could visit, right? All colds. The only I didn't leave the building at all that entire month. And I remember I actually tried to break out of the ward by going through the door in a wheelchair, which did not work because it was a pull door, not a push door. But, so very stir crazy, to be honest, because I was sharply declining, but couldn't go outside, couldn't, see anybody about it.
Yeah. So after I exhibited my symptoms, very quickly after, I lost my memory of what happened. So what happened was I was acting so erratically, crawling on the ground and screaming and doing all kinds of things that I had never done before that just started suddenly. My family and my boyfriend were very worried about my behavior, and the hospital, the ambulance was called and I was admitted to the mental health ward in the hospital. And again, this is during kind of a COVID period. So initially, the doctors were giving me medicine, things like lorazepam and things like that to try and figure out if it was a mental health issue. I spiked a fever, so they noticed that it was something else. It wasn't, necessarily, it wasn't that. And by that point, I had gone into a coma and I was in the intensive care unit. So because I was in a coma, and because it was COVID, the visiting restrictions were really tight. And it was during winter as well, so, I could relate as well. My mom actually, she felt that it was really important that someone visited me, because there was a regulation of no visitors at the time, but she asked the head nurse of the hospital. She wrote to her a long kind of email saying that my daughter is in a coma, and I really feel that it would be essential for her recovery and well-being that I talk to her, because there's a chance that she might wake up if she hears my voice. So 3 days later, she got permission it was like a special permission to come and talk to me. And after that time, as she came in to talk to me and play me music, she said that I responded when I was out in my coma. Like, I would kind of smile and, do certain gestures. So that was a complication of COVID that I think was thankfully overcome. Fast forward to after I had woken up in the hospital, and after I was out of the hospital, I went to Toronto rehab. And there I was, because the hospital that I was at was Trillium Health Partners. It was a COVID hotspot at the time. So when I arrived at Toronto rehab, I was in my small private room, and I was actually quarantined for 10 days because of COVID. So I was just kind of walking around my room, pacing. And then anyone who came into the room had to wear a hazmat suit to give me, any medicine or food or anything. So I do remember that. And I remember that at the rehab center, the patients would have things like sing-alongs and different kind of activities in the hall. And I was not allowed to leave my room, so I just had to look out the door for a while and kind of see what they were doing. So, yeah.
That's so intense. Okay, so the question to all three of you: you get diagnosed, and then what?
Well, actually, I forgot to mention this in the past question, but I wasn't allowed to see most of my family members. My parents did stay with me throughout the month because I was 13, wasn't legally allowed to make my own medical decisions. So after I was admitted, they couldn't figure out what the hell was wrong with me, because everybody previously had assumed psychiatric issue. And so with that, the first few days are okay, something's odd. I think they did a CAT scan, they did MRIs. They had to sedate me for the MRI because I wouldn't stop moving. And then, if I remember correctly, I was diagnosed via CSF, because a lot of my other results were odd and they found antibodies in the CSF. And after that, it was a matter of, okay, well, where are these antibodies coming from? And as it turned out, I had the ovarian teratoma, a dermoid cyst, and so that was surgically removed. That was a whole experience in and of itself, because I remember I was actively freaking out. I didn't know what was wrong with me, didn't know what the hell was happening. And they tried to get me to sign permission for the form, and I just kind of looked at the nurse, and couldn't, because I didn't know what was going on. I just heard, before you sign, you have to let you know there's a risk of death. What the hell? Mm-hmm. And so eventually my mother had to intervene and sign, and that was kind of the biggest thing for me, the advocacy from my mother in particular, because she was just incredible the entire time. But after the surgery, it was a very slow recovery. I think actually my worst point was post-surgery, because they still had the antibodies in there. So for a few days, I lost the ability to talk, to walk. Talking was the worst part, because if you couldn't tell, I love to talk. And beyond that, they said, okay, let's try plasmapheresis. And that worked for a while until I relapsed, and then it was rituximab. But yeah, month in the hospital, got out, and because I don't have very good self-preservation abilities, a month after that it was back to school.
Wow.
Yeah.
So after I was diagnosed, again, it was initially by a psychiatrist. There were also some colleagues that did continue to dismiss the diagnosis, but fortunately, she ensured that I got onto appropriate treatments, and I got onto IVIG, and then IVIG and steroids together, and then rituximab, and I did make a full recovery initially. The immunotherapy, it was withdrawn a little bit soon, and I did relapse a couple of times, and it was also really challenging in the relapse initially as well. By that time, I had moved away from Edmonton for a period of time, and I remember seeing two neurologists, both regarded as experts in the field, and the first one, she had looked at my files and had asked me some questions, and had concluded that she didn't feel that I had ever had seronegative encephalitis, but that the root of my cognitive decline was adult ADHD, even though not really having any history to suggest that as a root cause. But then, like a week or two later, I had seen a second expert in the field, and she did the same thing. She looked at my file, she asked me some questions, and then her reaction was like, I think we should be admitting you to the hospital, like immediately here, so you can get plasmapheresis and get out of this relapse of encephalitis. So. Yeah, I'm very grateful for the doctors that were able to recognize the very sick state that I had been in, and advocated to ensure that I got onto appropriate treatment.
Yeah, so while I was in my coma, the doctors were having kind of roundtable sessions trying to discuss with other hospitals and figure out what the problem was. So as they were doing this, I had two episodes of seizures when I was in my coma as well. And they noticed that I had an ovarian cyst, so similarly. And so they ended up doing testing where they sent it actually to, Dr. Musili was talking about the center in London, Ontario. They sent the test over there. It came back positive in the end. But in the meantime, they were working to solve and minimize kind of the symptoms and things like that. So they found out that because of the ovarian cyst, it burst and it activated my immune system, which attacked my brain. So that was the cause of it all, that the doctors believed caused everything. So what they did was they operated with the permission of my family, because I was unable to consent at the time I was in a coma. They removed my entire ovary. They said that the chance of relapse was less because of that. And then I was put on steroids. So I was put on prednisone. It was 1,000 milligrams initially. So it was like a really, really heavy duty dose of steroid, of anti-seizure medication like valproic acid, and rituximab. So I had 2 sessions of it, one when I was in a coma and then one when I was later awake in the hospital as well.
When I look at the three of you, I see, I'm going to put us all in the same age bracket, plus or minus a few years. You're probably the youngest, but we're probably in the same neighborhood. And we're still young, thank God. But, when I look at the three of you, I see 3 young, very bright, articulate women who have gone through very traumatic kind of health experiences. And I can relate in the sense of NMOSD that sometimes the symptoms that we experience are invisible. They're not visible to the naked eye. And being that this happened to all 3 of you when you were so young, how did having these invisible symptoms and going through what you were going through affect your interpersonal relationships in youth, Whoever wants to answer it first, by all means.
Yeah.
I can jump in. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think a lot of people didn't see the recovery process of it. So after I woke up in the hospital, I just remember waking up suddenly and thinking, I'm in the hospital. I'm connected to a bunch of machines. It's a very surreal and like out of body experience that was very terrifying. I remember looking at myself in the mirror and thinking I looked so jaundiced. And anyway, all that to say, when I got out of the hospital and went to Toronto rehab, there was that whole process of relearning to like walk properly, balance, even, cross my legs or write with a pen because my hand was so shaky. My strength was gone, so I couldn't open a door and kind of like dress myself and do these basic things that, you think you can do every day. So at the end of that, when I was out of Toronto rehab and I was able to do those things again, and I went out into the world, nobody could tell. Everyone would say, "Oh, you seem completely normal." But in my mind, 2 months prior, I was not even able to move on my own. So I think there was it was a very strange feeling. Because mentally, I was still, I think, in that place where I wasn't over it yet. I was still traumatized by the experience, but I just had to kind of continue on with my day-to-day, life and things like that. And I did feel well enough to work, but I wasn't cleared until 6 months later. So there was that kind of, tension where I was thinking, oh, I just want to get back to my routine and get back to driving because my license was suspended for medical suspension for a year afterwards as well. And I thought, I do feel well enough to do this. So it was a bit frustrating, even though I understood the reasons behind it. So, yeah.
I'd say for me, the invisible aspect, very, very challenging. I remember early on, if I would talk to people, the general reception was like, wow, you're looking much better now. You can hold a conversation, and when are you going back to school, or when are you going back out there? But they wouldn't realize that maybe just having that 30-minute conversation with them. After that, I might need to go and lay in bed for 4 hours just to recover from the auditory stimulation or just the energy depletion of trying to string coherent sentences together still. But then even for myself, with having the invisible symptoms, it sometimes would make me feel like, am I still really sick? Or, am I maybe just making excuses for myself or being lazy? But I kind of became my own worst critic in that sense, and was kind of like, okay, Alanna, you've lost a lot of your 20s to this illness, and what are you going to do to make up for that, or get back to building a career and that sort of thing? But I wish I would have just developed a little bit more self-compassion for myself and had more appreciation for really the feat of overcoming encephalitis, which I think it very much is, because many it can be fatal for some, and it can also be highly traumatic, which that resonated a lot earlier when Dr. Ye had mentioned in the panel earlier about PTSD. I can remember sometimes thinking, not actively suicidal, but thinking things like, I can see the appeal of maybe not being alive at this moment, or because these symptoms are just in my head, and other people don't seem to be recognizing them, and so it's taken some time to develop more of that self-compassion for myself as well, given the invisible aspects that still linger in some sense.
Yeah, for me, I've always had trouble with interpersonal relationships and connecting with other people anyways, because undiagnosed autism, ADHD, rural town, very weird. And so what really didn't help is when I had my initial onset, I was in my first year of high school as a scholarship student at a local boarding school. So already I was kind of an outcast because most of the kids in my class didn't speak the same language as me already, and they lived in the dorms, and I did not live in the dorms, and it was just very difficult to make friends. So I didn't really have a lot of interpersonal relationships at that point. But even afterwards, it stopped me from forming any because I didn't have the energy to talk to people. I couldn't go home from school. I had about one friend at the time, and even just talking to her was so much energy. And even after I transferred schools, like the friends that I made were friends of a friend that I already had, and without her, I wouldn't have made friends. And I love her for that forever. Shout out to her. But it's like Alanna mentioned as well, the invisible aspect, people can't tell a lot of the time, especially if you are quote unquote high performing, because I, due to the autism and ADHD, I already had a lot of experience with masking illness and cognitive deficit in certain aspects. So because of that performance, added to the fact that even just talking to people without the performance was very exhausting, I didn't make a lot of friends. Even now I struggle because I don't know how to operate in social circles because I never had that in high school. So like very big deficit in that area going into university now.
So on to more positive things. Who and or what served as a lifeline or lifelines for you all during these very difficult times? And Laura, I'm going to start with you because I see one of yours here.
That's right. He's here. Yes, I would say my boyfriend for sure. He was there. We just started dating too right when this happened. So we were friends first, so he knew, who I was. But
the best kind of relationship starts with friendship.
Yes,
just my
for
opinion.
sure. I know. And I was going to say too that I was exhibiting all that erratic behavior too, and he was probably thinking, what is happening? What is she doing right now? And my mom, I would say, because my mom was such an advocate for talking to me, for trying to bring me out of the coma. The doctors didn't even know if I was going to get out of that coma as well. So the fact that she went and she spoke to me every day and never gave up hope. Like she kept a journal every day that I was in the hospital, and I read it after so I could see every day what happened. Like today they did this to Laura. So even though I wasn't awake, I could then read it after and see like this amazing, testimonial of what happened to me. So I think that. And then there's a lot of things that happen afterwards, like, I had moon face, like a very round face after because of the steroids, all the weight gain after, where I saw like a transformation in myself, and the fatigue as well that the other ladies were talking about too, where it was just so exhausting to do anything. And so I felt like without that support, it would have been really difficult to recover.
Wow, that's a lot to start a relationship with, right? Good for you both. I'm glad you found each other. Alanna?
For me, I would say that it was connecting with fellow patients as well as caregivers and support groups. I definitely love my family, and they really supported me in the ways that they knew best. But speaking with people with the lived experience of encephalitis, they were really fundamental to my recovery as well. For example, just sharing some of the tactical knowledge in things like this is what you could do to fight an insurance appeal, and even just sending encouraging messages that would help in keeping me moving forward with things or finding answers. And so even overall, I think at any stage of the journey, support groups can be so helpful for anyone, especially if you're feeling alone. Because I can remember, like, in some of my sickest moments, kind of grappling with this question of, like, can I still be happy even in spite of any sort of physical limitations or cognitive limitations? And what I had found is that there are various studies out there on happiness that point to social connection and good relationships as one of the most important indicators of happiness. So, in today's day and age, there's the potential for connection in all sorts of forms. So, I'd really encourage anyone in the audience and anyone listening to really tap into the community here or online and really cultivate those relationships with one another, because that's some of the most powerful sources of well-being that we have.
For me, it would have definitely been my parents and my younger sibling. My parents are just incredible. They didn't fully understand everything at first, and it took a lot of adjusting because, prior to the illness, I was very self-sufficient, very high-performing, and they kind of had to adjust to the fact that I wasn't that anymore. But they did an amazing job with it. And my younger sibling, when I got sick, they were 9, and it was very, very difficult for them because obviously their older sister was gone for a month, and now the house is quieter. What the hell's going on? And so for them especially, they were huge for me. And also, again, I had a friend at the time, not friends anymore, but she was very helpful at the time as well. And generally, I've never been great at processing things and understanding emotions by myself, again, autism. So for me, books and video games have always been huge in helping to understand myself and what I'm feeling, why I'm feeling it, that kind of thing. And because it's a very niche disorder, I didn't really find any specifics, but just finding parallels to my experience in fictional characters or in the fictional stories that I read, that helped significantly because I was able to understand okay, I'm not the only person who's ever gone crazy and then come out the other side of it, looking normal. Mm-hmm. So that did help with the whole feeling less alone and making progress after the fact.
Speaking of books, I am friends with Susanna Cahalan, who wrote Brain on Fire, and she shares the same diagnosis as you all. I don't know if you've read her book at all. I know you have. Have you guys read her book?
I've seen the movie, but I haven't read the book yet.
Oh, I think the book is much better than the movie.
I heard, yeah.
Yeah, have you?
No, I have the book actually.
Oh my gosh.
And Sean, my boyfriend got it for me after I was hospitalized, and I said, I don't know if I'm in a place to read it yet.
That's fair.
And then, but I still haven't read it, but I've always meant to. So yeah.
Well, whenever you're ready, read it, to both of you. I actually, within weeks of my NMOSD diagnosis, I read Brain on Fire, or I listened to it because I couldn't see. And it was so fascinating, but also eerie how similar the symptoms were, the acute treatments were, the plasmapheresis, the rituximab, and all the things. And her book, even though we had a different diagnosis, helped me so much. It validated what I was going through and my lived experience. So I guess, Alanna, maybe the question is for you, and since you've watched the movie, how has her book or film or her story helped you all in your journey with AE? And I will tell her all of this, so yeah.
I really really appreciate the book for having just, it continues to raise a lot of awareness for autoimmune encephalitis and other autoimmune neurological conditions as well. And just hearing stories like hers and stories from us and others in the community that show that, life doesn't have to stop and grind to a halt after you're diagnosed, but that there are ways to move forward and still continue to have a meaningful and fulfilling life, definitely has brought so much hope in my own journey.
Amazing.
For me, I remember watching it for the first time, hearing the word olanzapine being said, and freaking out, turning the TV off and not going back to it for a week because did not like olanzapine. But afterwards, I finished watching it, and it definitely, it helps to know, especially the part at the end where she said, like, this many diagnoses have been made since. It helps to know that, again, you're not the first person in history to have experienced this, because it can feel like that. And I really appreciated how much awareness she brought to it, because without that, I mean, the diagnosis wouldn't be nearly as well known as it is.
So a question to the three of you, from the vantage point of patients, what do you feel are the largest unmet needs for the AE community? Anyone can take.
I would say just belief in the patients and what we are saying. Because even as an example of Brain on Fire, you know, I was reading some critics' reviews of the movie, And some of the critics were writing, I was just out of curiosity, I haven't seen the movie again, and some of the critics were saying, it just seems like she's crazy. Like, this is just a story about a crazy person. And it's just diminishing something that's so real, because obviously, as we know and we've lived it, like, it's not that at all. And that's such a, like, diminishing word for to use on anyone. So I think it's more like, understanding the symptoms and really digging into them a little bit instead of just dismissing the initial ones, from my perspective.
I guess I definitely have my bias here, but I would say that I think certain patient experiences and the patient perspective is not necessarily as well represented in the medical literature as perhaps it could be. Although there's definitely growing awareness of, say, the range of presentations and the range of onsets and what that can look like. So I think, we're making a lot of progress, and, organizations like the Sumaira Foundation is doing a lot to really elevate those patient perspectives, and that definitely brings me a lot of hope.
For me, I feel like the range of how wide and severe the symptoms can be, because I remember for my relapses when I went into the emergency room, even though I had previously tested positive for NMDA and had the everything and I had the symptoms again, I was told that, it's probably just ADHD. Okay, well, I haven't been diagnosed with ADHD. I've been diagnosed with this, and I don't think psychosis is a symptom of ADHD. And then a few years later as well, I had another cyst grow in, and we weren't sure what to do about it. But we were very, very aware that if I had this cyst taken out, it could require a full ovarectomy. And so then I had to go, they wouldn't do the surgery if I didn't get fertility treatment first, get egg removal. So that then took a very long time, because I was 15 at the time. It takes a long time to get a 15-year-old approved for egg removal and for that kind of gynecological surgery. And so I think people don't understand just how dire it can be for the patients, because I was very heavily pushing hey, I want this done. I want this done. I don't want this thing in me, because if it happens again, it won't be good. So it's the sense of urgency, because obviously with the invisible symptoms, they don't know what's going on in your head. So just a bit more empathy, a bit more understanding, okay, it is that serious sometimes. Yeah.
I think the biggest unmet need is we need treatments for you guys.
Oh.
We need approved treatments. Anything in the pipeline? Are you aware?
There's the trial that we talked about earlier that is not available. Oh, yes, thank you. So the question was whether there are any treatment in the pipeline for encephalitis and NMDA encephalitis in particular. So there's a trial that's ongoing in the States right now. That's we were talking about trying to bring it here and being unsuccessful with that, but the results will be available to everyone, and we're hoping there'll be positive results for this trial. There's another trial that's underway as well, and then are lots of studies that are more of those retrospective kind of studies, some of which we're doing, but not so much to find new treatments, but find which treatments work better, and how to diagnose the condition sooner.
Great, thank you. My final question to the three of you is, what would you advise a newly diagnosed patient? We'll start with you, Erin.
Either because it's so difficult to advocate for yourself when you're in that state, because a lot of the time I was in no position to advocate for myself. I was still having major hallucinations. Is to have somebody there to advocate for you. You either, if they're not there already, fight for it. And if you can't get anybody, you have to fight for yourself, which is very unfortunate. But because of how not well known it is, a lot of the time people will not understand how serious it is. And so you have to advocate, I need this accommodation, I need this surgery, I need this treatment. Somebody has to fight for you, because otherwise they'll be reluctant. Because again, so many of the treatments aren't approved. And so you have to go through so much red tape just to get them. So having somebody ready to advocate for you, biggest advice.
For me as a newly diagnosed patient, I would have, it would have been helpful for me to hear to just, slow down and take recovery at your own pace, and don't have any sort of shame or guilt around like taking your time. And recovery happens along multiple dimensions. There's not just the physical recovery and cognitive recovery. There's also spiritual recovery and social recovery and on and on. And the healing along all of those dimensions can occur on a different timeline, and it may not feel linear, but the best thing you can do is just kind of learn to take those ups and downs in stride and really give yourself grace, and really take care of your mind and body, because they've carried you through a lot.
Well said. Laura?
Yeah, and I think I'm so thankful to the medical teams who helped me and everything as well along the way. I think too, just because of the busyness of hospitals and things like that, it's really important for a patient to write down as many questions as they have initially. I found that afterwards, my memory is completely fine. But initially, when I first woke up and was recovering, my short-term memory was really affected, and I didn't really think I didn't really think of that at the time. So it's important to kind of write down, like, why am I taking this medication? What is the purpose of it? Because I was being given medication and I had no idea what it was for. I was just getting a bunch of pills, at a time to take. So just kind of things like that you might think are common sense questions. Sometimes if you have this condition, you don't necessarily think of the common sense right away. So it's important to be able to refer back to like something written where you can say, oh, okay, I had, these thoughts before that I can articulate and I should articulate.
Actually, I have one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. But how does it make you feel coming to an event like this?
Definitely less isolated, because I've never met somebody who's ever had A in person before.
Today's the first time IRL?
First time ever, yeah. Yeah, I went to a support group once, didn't really pan out because I was the youngest by I think about 30 years. But it's nice to know that there are other people with it, and I'm not alone.
Amazing. I'm so happy to hear that. Alanna?
It's super exciting, and just to echo a theme of the day, and like Erin had said, it's so easy to just feel alone when you get diagnosed with a rare disease, and so having all these people show up in person, it's really testament to the fact that you're not alone, and there are others out there that have walked in similar shoes as you, and understand what you've gone through, and that's really powerful and healing.
Yeah, I think events like this are really important for patients, because I know it from my perspective anyway, a lot of times I feel reluctant to talk about it with people in my life, because I don't want to be a burden. Not to say that they would see me as one, but I would perceive it, maybe they don't want to hear about this. And sometimes you kind of isolate yourself. So it's nice to be in an environment with others who can relate, and also people who are interested, like doctors or others who are interested in hearing about this and asking questions, because it makes me feel more empowered to share my story, and that people are interested, and that it will help others as well.
Wow, thank you. That means a lot to hear, and it kind of validates for me that like we need to keep doing things like this, because sometimes I'll tell you I just want to give up. Alanna and I worked together a lot over the last few years, and I think I've threatened to quit many times, but I'm glad that I didn't, because I think it's really important to do this. And I hope, and for the live audience, for the virtual audience, that everyone feels that this is truly a psychologically safe environment, and I think that's really important to have. I do want people to feel empowered, supported, informed on all the things. So thank you for sharing all of that. Thank you also for your courage. It takes a lot to come up with cameras everywhere, strangers everywhere, talking about some of the worst times of your life. So I applaud your courage, your authenticity, and your vulnerability. And I have no doubt that the folks in the room and the folks who will be watching this after the fact from all over the world will be able to draw inspiration from your experiences and your bravery. So please join me in giving these lovely ladies a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay, we did it.